I'm going to try to be very minimal with my speaking because in our pre-discussions, they ran right up to the buzzer and we're still just scratching the surface. But I just kind of like to say that this is a big future problem and a big current problem, how advances in computing will affect offensive cybersecurity and defensive security. What kind of security do we need to protect those advances? What kind of applications are coming out that need to be protected differently? How will this affect the workforce? We're going to try to touch on at least a little bit on all of those. I kind of like to say my current position I'm at Georgetown's Center for Security and Emerging Technology on what's called the Cyber AI Project. So I'm looking a little bit future computing. My previous role in the National Security Council on the Cyber Directorate kind of gave me a vision of why this panel is so important. So much of what we can do in the world is limited by how dangerous it is, how many attackers are out there trying to stop us from doing the things that we need to do, and how many applications don't come to pass or aren't able to achieve their potential because of the threats that we live in. And that's what we'll hope to talk about today with this esteemed panel. I'll also try to be short with the introductions. We've got Jan Shoshitaishvili. Close? Okay. He's an associate professor at ASU, and he led Shellfish's entry into the DARPA Cyber Grand Challenge. We've got Claire Vishik, who is a chief science officer and CTO at Stealth Startup, but previously was a fellow at Intel, focused on security and trusted computing. We've got Rachel Greenstadt, professor at NYU, who's focused on trustworthy intelligence systems and brings an interdisciplinary approach that's much needed. And we've got Jeremy Epstein from GTRI. He's a co-director of the Institute for Cybersecurity and Resilient Information Studies and was previously at NSF and DARPA. The question I'd like to help kick this off with is kind of to get to know the panelists and understand the pipelines and the types of technologies all at once. What I've asked them to do is give a very short introduction that says how they were first exposed to cybersecurity, what they're working on now, and what they expect to be working on in the next few years. Let's start at Jan.
Oh, sure. Happy to be here. The thing is not. Oh, now the thing is on. Perfect. Okay. Happy to be here. Thank you for hosting, Drew. I want to start out kind of with my background. I didn't get very good grades in undergrad and just kind of gave up on grad school until through a twist of fate, I found myself at a Capture the Flag cybersecurity competition and I got hooked. This pulled me into graduate school, into graduate research, and is the reason I became a professor. And so at ASU, I have kind of three core interests. One is cybersecurity competitions as a form of education, as a form of that last mile preparedness for the workforce, and a form of exploring the cutting edge. We do an enormous amount of research in the cutting edge in primarily vulnerability analysis. We find, fix, understand vulnerabilities in large complex software systems. And I do a lot of education at scale to try to kind of inspire the next generation of hackers. And all of these things, there's a lot of very interesting future directions that I'll just really quickly cover. One, in education, over the last decade, maybe even more, we've seen a huge explosion in interest in computer science. Classes have been growing at ASU. At the junior level, I teach 1,000 students a semester in our junior year cybersecurity course. It's extreme scale, but to achieve this scale, we've had to just realistically dumb down some of the material. Nowadays, in order to earn a C in my class, you would need to do roughly the same amount of material that would get you an F maybe 5 years ago. And so this dumbing down of the curriculum has implications for the future of cybersecurity as the future workforce comes online. And to try to kind of fight this, to keep the students very competent, we've had to do a lot of innovation in education to make that better. The interesting thing here that I'm seeing is, one, AI is starting to eat away at the demand from our students. People seem to be going to computer science less out of fear that their job will be AI'd away. AI is disrupting the early stages of education. So my students GPT solve everything until a point where they can't, and then they flunk out. And that's not good either. And three, we're kind of historically have been relying on the U.S. being an extremely attractive place for students from all over the world to come and study. And shifting views around the world might be impacting that. Some upcoming challenges in cybersecurity education. In cybersecurity research for vulnerability analysis, a lot of challenges coming up from just the radically increasing complexity of systems that it used to be no one understands the whole system. Now there are parts of systems that no one understands, period, because they are AI synthesized. The security aspects of these are very vague. There's a lot of additional demand for a new kind of vulnerability analysis in the output of AI code. And there is an constant pressure in terms of funding in cybersecurity, in that funding that's going in right now won't be seen as, we won't be seeing dividends from that for 5 to 7 years. And in cybersecurity, where there is an urgency, there are cybersecurity events, compromises, breaches every day, that has kind of an aggravating effect on impatience with the research community. And then in the competition space, just as these systems get incredibly complex, to have a realistic cybersecurity competition, the barrier to entry is extreme. And pulling in good talent to further develop them, to really almost like an apprenticeship model, to get them learning through these competitions so they're ready to contribute to the cybersecurity workforce. It's unclear how to do that while maintaining any level of realism or preparedness. That's my kind of opening thoughts.
Great. And so you already started to touch on the workforce. We can come back to that, or you can incorporate it into your opening statements if you'd like. Claire?
Thank you. And I know that this is working. Is it? Okay. I fell into cybersecurity accidentally, like many people who got exposed to this subject in the 1990s. I came to a lab, Schlumberger Laboratory for Computer Science, as an intern. The lab was focusing on what was then artificial intelligence, expert systems, PD solvers, and things of this nature. But it also was one of the earliest adopters of NCSA Mosaic. And that was the area where we applied cybersecurity principles that we were working with. It was immediately apparent that security did not exist. There was limited awareness that it was needed as compared to even privacy. With regard to privacy, there was work by then in re-identification. There were the first regulations in Europe. People knew that it was important. It was, to some extent, taken into consideration. But security, not at all. Neither theory or practice were really a serious consideration in the mid and even late 90s. Then it appeared that the future of security for the internet is PKI. PKI is going to take over everything. There will be multiple PKIs, PKI bridges. Those who work in security today understand how naive this idea was, but it was extremely popular. With regard to practice, an anecdote that came to mind is a tutorial that I once gave at the RSA in the late 1990s. I was simply explaining how system administrators do not allow to connect as root to their systems with Telnet, if anyone here remembers what Telnet is. So I telnetted to a major university because its page was open on the screen, entered root, and then ABC 123. And what do you know? I was in. So that was pretty much the state of security. And I can see why people who started working in this area in the 1990s are optimistic despite all the setbacks about what security is now, because without any doubt, we made significant progress. Having worked in 3 labs, one focusing on software, one on networks, and one on hardware, I think I know it all at the high level. Working in industry for a long time generally means that you will become a generalist. And I worked on a variety of projects in security, from trusted computing to confidential computing and secure enclaves, from physically unclonable functions to computational privacy, from homomorphic encryption to multi-party secure computation, and a lot of things in between. This is really helpful for what I'm doing now. Now I am looking at how the interesting ideas that you come up with can be commercialized. We are looking specifically at ideas that require low barriers to entry, that are technically novel, have a novel market, and potential for expansion. So this is an ideal situation, but a lot of opportunities there exist. I am very glad that I am able to take what was the predominantly, even though products came out of it, theoretical knowledge, and turn it into something that can become a successful company. What I want to do in the future is working on something larger problems, not necessarily just the technology problems that have been impossible to solve so far. One of them is system security. We know how to create a relative security for the elements of a system. You have a TPM, you maybe have a secure or more secure operating system, you may have other elements that are secure, but how does it all work together? How does it remain secure when it joins another domain or leaves its usual domain? How can you create some kind of analysis that allows you to indicate to which extent you can trust the system? I hope there will be an opportunity to work on this huge project sometime in the future. Another area that I think needs change and where I would like to have a role, if it ever happens, is the organizations that support security. For instance, standards organizations. They were created in the 1940s, almost 80 years ago. They were very avant-garde at the time, but now the consensus, the organization that relies on just 2 annual meetings, the purely volunteer nature of the technical development is a drag. It would be great to create the ability to come up with standards that everyone could use much faster and replace them much faster. So this is one other thing I hope to engage in the future, if there is an opportunity and other minds that want to look into it.
Hi, is this on? Yeah, okay, great. So I come by my interest in sort of interdisciplinary cybersecurity pretty honestly, in that I was a history nerd growing up, and I did a History Day Los Angeles project on military cryptography in the Pacific Theater in World War II. And I was very popular. And I hadn't really thought about being in computing or cybersecurity until I went to college at MIT, and then I became fascinated by computing as one of the key things that humanity was doing in my lifetime and wanted to be part of it, and particularly the possibilities of modern cryptography to enable democracy, security, and privacy at the same time as seeing the world kind of move in kind of the opposite direction with these technologies, which led me back from the technologies to the humanities again to sort of think about the economics of information security, psychology, ethnography, some of these things to kind of interrogate how security decisions are made and deployment. At the same time, I became interested in developments in AI because here is an area that was not calcified and had all these exciting developments that I could see in the early aughts would be important, but weren't, like, the security problems weren't necessarily there, and people weren't really thinking about that from an adversarial perspective. So I started to do some of that work. And in my early academic career, I was funded by the DARPA Computer Science Study Group, which was a great program, and that kind of taught me to think about all these problems a little bit from a national security lens. So that's a bit of kind of the origin story of where my work is, and I continue to work in those different areas. I think I'm interested in the fact that I think that we're moving from a world in which we had to worry a lot about humans exploiting humans and then humans exploiting computers to a situation where we're more worried now about computers exploiting computers and computers exploiting humans. And I think that is advancing various interesting interpersonal threats. I think there's some really great things that have happened in security in terms of things like password managers and risk-based authentication that work great in Fortune 500 company scenarios, but maybe don't work for families. They don't work for countries as well in certain ways. They don't work in all sorts of interesting edge cases, and I think that's a really interesting space. And I will talk more about the other stuff as we move on, I guess. Yeah.
Good afternoon. So my first exposure to this field was when I was 15 years old, and I almost got thrown out of college at an age when most people weren't thinking of college because I had hacked the university's IBM 360 mainframe. I had also developed a buffer overrun attack. This was in the mid-1970s, so long before the term buffer overrun existed. I had built one. I didn't really know what to do with it. I took one course as an undergraduate. My school was quite advanced because there was an undergraduate course in, well, of course, it wasn't called cybersecurity in those days. And then I took one graduate course with Dorothy Denning, whom some of you might have heard of, and the TA for that course was Matt Bishop, whom many of you know as well. So that was quite an interesting thing in history. In the late 1980s, I got my first job in the field building secure Unix systems. And my mother asked me if there was a future in the field. I think we know the answer. So let's see. I retired from NSF a few months ago. I'm at Georgia Tech Research Institute. And let's see, in terms of futures, when I interviewed at NSF in 2011, I said the two biggest things that we needed to do in the SATSI program, Secure and Trustworthy Cyberspace program that I ran for many years, were to get better integration with social scientists and to do more in Internet of Things. Now, that was a 2011 view of the world. I did start a program to bring social scientists and computer scientists together. Did I fund you through that, Rachel?
Absolutely, you did.
Okay. I funded about 75 programs through that, and I'm pretty proud of that effort. Of course, Internet of Things grew cyber physical systems and now critical infrastructure. I think 14 years later, I still think those are the two most important things that we need to be looking to for the future. And what is that thing called? AI. I guess we need to look at that as well.
Yeah. And so people's origin stories in cyber are almost as varied as their priorities. Like the lists of their were expansive. I don't know if we'll be able to shrink that down at all, but maybe we can take a kind of crack at it. There's a lot of things that feel that are maybe theorized as being important in cybersecurity, and some things that are realized that are actually important. Sometimes those things change, and they sometimes even go from things that feel realized to things that are more theorized or that aren't as high priority of a threat. What are some of the things that either people are overestimating or underestimating in the now and soon?
So, when I started at UCSB for my grad work, I was really interested in analyzing binary code to find bugs and then exploit them, fix them, etc. And my advisor said, "Well, this is a really well-studied field, and the community considers it to be solved." And this was in 2010. Binary analysis was solved. And since then, I did my whole PhD on binary analysis, and DARPA ran a massive program, the Cyber Grand Challenge, on binary analysis. The IoT craze brought binary analysis into the front, the very frontmost awareness of security, one of the many frontmost awarenesses in terms of analyzing these embedded systems. And we're still in the midst of trying to figure out how to properly and optimally analyze binaries. So, it's one of these things where it was for years. It took me until 2013 to convince my advisors to allow me to just go full into that. And that's because on the topic of funding, there was a program from DARPA that made the observation that binary analysis is actually a very fledgling field that's kind of dead because it was considered to be solved. So, that's one example that I can see off the top of my head, and it kind of speaks back to that gap between, a lot of what we did in 2013 in binary analysis didn't actually start bearing fruit in terms of being adopted into industry and actually having an impact on IoT security until about 2022 or so, which is quite a gap between that initial funding and the impact we see.
I probably will present three axes that determine to some extent to which whether or not an area will be hyped, will be visible, and frequently more visible than it deserves. The first axis is very simple. Is it an effort to build a system or to break a system? Obviously, because it's faster, more spectacular, easier to present when you break a system, that creates considerably more repercussions and visibility than building a system then is more secure than its competitor system. The second area is who is the threat agent. Is it a disgruntled employee, or is it a university security researcher? Is it maybe a hostile government? Depending on who the agent is, the visibility will be different. The amount of theoretical work put into it will be different. A university researcher who breaks a system for a big company or a commonly used product will receive considerably more visibility than a hostile government because their work is deliberately obfuscated. The complexity doesn't play a significant role there. It was in the 1990s that I first saw the slide saying the complexity of cyber attacks is increasing exponentially. I see these slides every year since then. Actually, the most successful attacks that are meaningful, have a significant impact, are typically very simple. Remember Melissa or I Love You from 1990s. Remember phishing or even some versions of ransomware. They are not complicated. So the last axis that determines whether or not there will be a lot of theory, a lot of work around a security threat, and if it will be visible, is the economic advantage. This determines what vulnerabilities will be exploited, what creative attacks will be mounted. You probably have noticed that while there are a lot of devices that have explicit vulnerability produced by smaller companies, they are almost never subject of journalism. But when a large company with common products like Microsoft, like Intel, like Google is attacked, the attack is successful, a new vulnerability is detected, whether or not this vulnerability has a significant impact, it's likely to be very visible. So, making or breaking, who is the agent, and what is the economic benefit are probably the main determinants to see whether or not an attack will be visible.
You're welcome to chime in if you'd like, but we can, either way.
I've got some things. I think that this is an area where we don't really know. And I think this is an area where we actually really do need research to understand things. Like, we can look retrospectively at the thing like ransomware, first theorized in the early 1990s in academia. Another technology transfer, lovely story. But which was facilitated by, the development of cryptocurrency, as well as the sort of increasing real-time reliance on computing systems that made these things economically viable. So I do think that the economic lens is really helpful here to understand when these things will happen, as well as the type of threat modeling, the types of things you have to worry about with regard to state actors versus cyber criminals that are in it for the money versus stalkers, bullies, and perpetrators of domestic violence. Those are very different types of threats, and I think they all matter. And I think that there is some interesting things in terms of, in particular with AI, that make me wonder, because there are right now a ton of different attacks on AI systems in terms of adversarial evasion and poisoning and so on, that we see theorized, but we don't yet see in practice. And I think, one thing that could change that again is changing macroeconomic conditions, where if it becomes difficult for somebody to, instead of going to work for NVIDIA or Google or OpenAI, if their best option with wherever they are in the world and the information they have is to do cybercrime, then they'll probably do cybercrime or work for their government in various ways and so on. So I think that's an interesting thing. I also think that the interaction with sort of delicate socio-technical systems like Wikipedia, for example, and these AI models are things that we don't really understand, where they're now feeding the models and being used as a source of ground truth, but people are also using the models to generate these, to contribute to these systems. And I think that there's there's a possibility for that to all go quite bad when we couple it with things like automated social engineering and manipulation of AI for SEO and things like that. So that's one of the things that I'm thinking about in these cases. And I think that we do need to not just sort of speculate in this way, but actually start to really think about what makes those inflection points and threats happen, and how could we rigorously think about these questions.
So your comment, Rachel, about ransomware being first hypothesized by academics reminded me, I have a question for the audience. How many of you have heard of, or even better yet, read the book When Harley Was Won? Is there anyone in the room who has read that book? 1972 science fiction story about viruses. And I think it even used the word virus. So even though there are other people who claim to have invented the concept and the term, it actually goes back to a science fiction book that won the Nebula Award, for those of you who are science fiction fans. So anyway, with all respect to my good friend Matt Scholl, who just retired from NIST, my nominee for the hype in our field is quantum and the effects of quantum on cryptography. And I think that for the vast majority of uses, quantum is really not going to make any difference, not only in my lifetime, but not in anyone else's lifetime in this room, that it isn't going to become cost effective for somebody to use a quantum computer system to figure out which web pages I'm looking at WashingtonPost.com or even Amazon or even my bank. It's just not going to be cost effective. For national security stuff, yeah, we need to be concerned about the effect of quantum on cryptography, but I'm going to argue from a hype perspective that's way over there. And software vulnerabilities are going to swamp the quantum systems as the avenue for attackers for a long time. The area that I think we underestimate perhaps is the impact, and some people in this room, and maybe even most people in this room, recognize critical infrastructure. Everything is critical infrastructure. Yes, we've seen some attacks on water systems and power systems and shipping and things like that. But many years ago, someone from Johnson & Johnson told me they didn't, and this was 25 years ago, they didn't worry about attacks because who would want to attack a baby powder company? There would just be no cred in doing that. Now everybody is vulnerable to attacks, and anybody, even mom and pop pizza parlors are being attacked, and maybe the pizza ovens are being attacked as well. And I think we have underestimated how big a risk that is to the economy and so on. So I'll stop there.
And I want to point out that, and these pizza ovens being hacked to shreds isn't just a problem for the pizza parlors. The problem,
the fire department that has to put it out.
First of all, and then the second of all, these pizza ovens start hosting massive botnets spread around the world that then take out critical infrastructure in denial of service attacks, for example.
Which creates interesting externalities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On kind of the hype train, I think researchers are very good at hyping up certain findings. And, you might argue Y2K didn't end up causing, worldwide billionaires and nuclear war because of all of the hype and then people taking it seriously. But another example I'd bring up is all the microarchitectural attacks that have emerged over the last 8 years or so. They're awesome, super exciting attacks from a technical perspective, seem to have a very high impact, and yet we don't really see them in practice compared, again, like you said, to buffer overflows or just normal software security attack. So it's very frustrating. We're like stuck in the 2010s, maybe even earlier, in terms of global security. But we're discovering all this new stuff, and it's like, look at this. There's quantum. Quantum chips exist. But you're like, yeah, but so do buffer overflows still somehow.
I was going to let Claire comment on the microarchitecture, but if she wanted to, but it would no need to. It's that I'm not sure if that felt like it shrank the problem at all. Maybe a couple things. Maybe a couple things got scoped out. But let's keep in mind that we need to leave some time for audience questions. Jan painted a scary picture about the pipeline, especially as we have not the colonial pipeline, but the workforce pipeline. As we have staffing shortfalls across, at least reportedly across the entire industry, is anybody more optimistic, or does everybody line up with his view?
So I got a message. So I'm ex-NSF. I have to emphasize the X part. I got a message the other day that it was forwarded from someone that NSF has told universities not to bring any more students in through the CyberCore program because they don't have enough money. They have enough money to pay for the second year of people who have already done the first year in the current academic year, but not to accept anyone else for the new academic year. That's an incredibly short-sighted move from a national security perspective. I'm not faulting NSF. I understand they don't have budget. That's become very unclear. But from a national perspective, and it's not just those students, it's also the institutions. There are institutions like Carnegie Mellon, which produces the largest number of scholarship for service students, and it'll hurt them. But there's other institutions like Dakota State University. I wonder how many people in this room have even heard of Dakota State University. Few folks. They put out the second most cybersecurity graduates in the United States. At the time I visited them a number of years ago, it was close to 50% of all students at that university were studying cybersecurity. And you kill something like CyberCore, you may kill that university, which is a major contributor to our national security. And I think you can't underestimate the impact of pipeline. And I would incidentally point out Dakota State, by virtue of where they are, virtually all their students are U.S. citizens. They are not drawing a huge number of foreign citizens, because who the hell would want to live in Madison, South Dakota?
Yeah, just to follow up briefly on that, we have a scholarship for service program as well, and I'd heard that it's been really challenging also just for the existing students in the program, because we spend a lot of time trying to screen for students that really do care deeply about the national security mission and want to serve in government. They'd gone through the program, they'd gotten federal jobs and job offers, and then they don't know what that means for their scholarship and their commitment now that those jobs are gone. Mm-hmm. And
we are actually hiring them at Georgia Tech. We can hire them at Georgia Tech Research Institute. So if you have any students you want to send me,
well, I mean, but what that means for their scholarship service commitment,
and it waives their. I mean, it counts as federal employment because we're a UARC. So I will be happy to take them.
Anyway,
anyone else? Anyone else?
Yeah, but and they're excellent students. But yeah, but I do think, just to speak more optimistically, I do think that cybersecurity is seen sometimes as being kind of narrow, when I actually think it's one of the broadest, computer science disciplinary. Security doesn't respect disciplinary boundaries any more than I do. And I think there's some real opportunity to kind of train people to think holistically and interdisciplinary and collaboratively. I think these, the capture the flag attack modes are great and they get people excited, but I think a model where people, collaborate to defend and maybe, AI as the adversary here can be helpful in that regard, to think about new models for education, and building up the workforce. I think there are opportunities.
From a practitioner, I keep hearing about the dearth of qualified talent in cybersecurity. I have not experienced it directly. I think there are about 1.3 million practitioners in cybersecurity in the US, if you understand cybersecurity in a broad way, not just security researchers, but everyone who is engaged in various aspects of cybersecurity. Every cybersecurity job my colleagues in other companies and I ever posted created a huge number of applicants. It was a matter of selection rather than a matter of finding a qualified applicant. I think we have a good number of qualified professionals. A lot of cybersecurity professionals are trained on the job. If you look at the oldest master's programs, the one that comes to mind in this area is Royal Holloway in the UK. They have two strands. One of them is those who already work in the area or near the area, and their employer pays for them to sort of formalize their knowledge to get a master's degree. This is a very common route for more mature professionals in cybersecurity. They start somewhere else and they then elevate their skills to cybersecurity. This is very common. Another thing I would recommend for my academic colleagues to consider is sort of to matrix the skills that are needed to the skills that are interesting intellectually. Again, in the UK, there is a program that's still running called Cybersecurity Universe of Knowledge. They created sort of blueprints for all the areas that they could think of in cybersecurity. We used it to formulate job requirements. Overlaying them on the requirements is easy. Overlaying them on the existing undergraduate university programs is not. There is a lot of disconnect. So I think that it is a growing field, growing at something like between 6 and 8% in terms of at least spending on cybersecurity. Every year it will require more professionals, but I don't think we are in a dire situation where we desperately need more and have nowhere to get them.
Can I tell a really quick story relating to that? In 2010, I started a scholarship program, not related to NSF, but through a nonprofit, to get more women in cybersecurity. And I went to a nonprofit that did a lot of scholarships, and I said, find me women who are interested in scholarships to study cybersecurity. And they came back and they said, there aren't any. And I said, and eventually they found one person. I funded her. She ended up getting a PhD, became a successful researcher. Next year, same thing happened. The year after that, I went to CRA and I said, CRA, can you find me women interested in studying cybersecurity? And that was a very successful program for 10 years. But the issue was that the first organization I went to didn't know where to look. And I think that when we're trying to figure out, what is our supply chain or pipeline for students, we have to make sure we're looking in the right places and not looking in the wrong places, like the unnamed first organization I went to.
There's a bit of a tendency to get stuck in our old ways, even among cutting-edge researchers. It was awesome to hear Dakota State University. So at ASU, we created the American Cybersecurity Education Institute, partnering with Dakota State University, actually. And it is a DARPA-supported effort to kind of revolutionize how cybersecurity is taught. We have a online, freely available platform called pwn.college to teach hands-on cybersecurity skills, and anyone can just load up their browser and go and learn. The idea here is, we talk about the skill gap, whether the skill gap is a gap of people being aware of cybersecurity and aware of people being interested in cybersecurity, whether we can hire or cannot hire. I think the critical thing is just to kind of match the skills with the interests and the demand. There's a lot that we can do in the academic model that goes beyond traditional, computer science, bachelor students coming in and sitting in classrooms and et cetera, et cetera. Things like freely open platforms. ASU is not unique in this. There's other, curricula available from other people that feels like might be having its moment soon in a weirder educational landscape.
And every time someone says Dakota State University, I get an Amazon gift certificate.
Hell yeah.
Let's invite questions.
Hi, all. Thanks for this really fascinating panel. My name's Corey Faclaris. I'm from UNC Charlotte. My general area of research is in social cybersecurity, so my work is very interdisciplinary. I'm interested because I'm a third-year faculty member, and this is also in my brain. What are some of, when you think about people problems in cybersecurity, there's a lot of things that we know are a problem, and they've been around for a long time because people don't really change. Their behavior is very predictable. But I'm wondering, from your different perspectives, what are some useful, interesting people problems in cybersecurity that we should be looking to put more research effort into, more resources into in the next 5 to 10 years?
I'll start with one thing is that it's something I like to think about a lot, and one of my hobby horses is thinking about the one user, one device assumption that is not the way that anybody uses computer devices. Like, do you raise your hand if nobody except you ever uses your phone to take a picture, to make a phone call, to look at something? Maybe there's a couple people, but it's pretty rare. And so I think that the people, the taking, not making, we talked in the AI panel, they talked about, robots maybe opening cabinet doors, and maybe we have to change the cabinet doors. To some extent, maybe we have to do that, but we can't change the people too much. And I think meeting people with how they are and how they want to use these things and those security models and making security models for them, I think is a big deal.
There's also kind of the traditional stuff. My brother called me the other day and said, Jan, I was on a website and it popped up a download thing and I hit enter and then it said, are you sure you want to run blah.exe? And I hit yes, and then it says, warning, blah.exe is trying to make changes to this and that, and I hit yes, 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 and now my computer is acting weird. and this was this year, right? So we do all of this incredible, groundbreaking research in cybersecurity, but people will, cross mountains to get exploited.
But in a lot of cases, yes is the right answer to all of those questions.
Yes, exactly. We train them, or the classic thing. I was on the phone with my bank, and I said, we're sending you a verification code, read it back to me. And I was like, this is what you should be training people not to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that some thought to that needs to be given. And it's clearly a tricky question because it still exists decades later.
Areas, one of them is well studied, but there are no answers. How much additional functions related to security or privacy will a user tolerate? Angela says, for instance, has done a lot of work on this, and the number of tolerance is pretty low. It would be good to create more concrete models, not only what percentage of additional functions, but also what specific functions are not well tolerated by an average user. The second area intuitively appears to be correct. Now everyone is using devices from the very early age, well before they start kindergarten. Should we start teaching security much earlier? Will it make a difference for when the really active use of devices is performed by the children? I have not seen consistent studies in this area. And then the last area that I think we should try to study is what security and privacy, not in theoretical regulatory way that we think everyone accepts, means to people. Privacy is important, everyone says so, but at the same time, there is this incredible desire by almost everyone to share a lot of information. So how do we define privacy so that it supports a continuum of people's feelings about how private they should be? The same about security, the same about trust. Surveys show that, for instance, there is a lot more trust in the internet in countries that are not really havens of human rights, whereas in developed countries there is a lot less trust. How do we create a system of regulatory and technical actions that combine these feelings in a continuum rather than mandating just one solution for everyone?
Great. In the front?
Yeah, Steve Lipner from SafeCode. Little different spin on the education problem. One of the things that I remember, trying to make this short, when in my misspent career, I occasionally had the responsibility for responding to security vulnerabilities in products for a pretty major company, and I had hired an engineer to help with this task. Basically triage the problem and get the product group to fix it. A guy with a master's degree in computer science from a pretty good place brought a vulnerability report into him and showed him, here's what the researcher did. Here's, what happened. Here's how the system got owned. Can you work with the product group to get this fixed and get a bulletin out? And his response was, why would anybody do that? Mm-hmm. Tell them not to do that. And that's sort of, my exposure to the security literacy of the general computer science population. Okay, we actually, at some level, we were never. Hiring people was hard, but we could do that. But the thing we always worried about: how do you take 40,000 or 60,000 developers and make sure all of them know that their code has to be secure? And we can do the stuff that they need to make it secure. We can give them desktop static analysis. We can, build fuzzing into the pipeline. We can do whatever we need to do. But fundamentally, it's up to the developer to write secure code. And believe it or not, I at least don't believe that artificial intelligence is either going to replace the developer or make that problem go away.
The way that we approach this at ASU, the reason my intro to cybersecurity class is so big is it's required for all ASU computer science students. Thank you. And thus, all the students come out with some awareness, at least, of why someone might do something like that, even if it's just because it's super fun, but also because of historical context that we teach them. I think a combination of that and whatever the future of the curriculum of computer science looks like, having some level of cybersecurity exposure with a hands-on component is critical. Combined with what we're exploring right now is an enormous amount of AI collaboration with human developers, where maybe it's just enough to have an idea that buffer overflows, or I keep picking on them because Jeremy mentioned them earlier, but other memory corruption vulnerabilities or content injection exists, and then an AI assistant can help. We're participating in DARPA's AI Cyber Challenge right now, and some of the capabilities of these techniques, not to be AI, but applied properly and with some consideration for an interaction with human developers, are extremely powerful and could really move the needle there.
Jeremy, you didn't get to weigh in on the last one. Looked like you were ready for this one.
Dave Evans at University of Virginia teaches a course, Defense Against the Dark Arts, which is, I think, making it sexy to learn about security may be part of it.
Yeah, great. Offense is a great way to do it, but defense, making defensive security exciting, that's an interesting challenge.
And it is a challenge for researchers too, because this shoot the messenger attitude definitely persists. I recently had to do, like, rather late in my career, my first like really serious disclosure to a large company, and it was nervous making because of these attitudes that can cause problems. So yeah.
Great. This might be the last one, depending on how long it goes in the back.
I'm Sima Setumadhavan, Columbia University. This question is a reaction to what Jeremy and Jan said. Jeremy, you were like somewhat negative on quantum security, and Jan, you didn't like microarchitectural security attacks. I have a question. What do you think is the right time to start studying security of these things? Should it be always reactive after it becomes a huge problem? And clearly you're not suggesting that we build broken processes with no security guarantees in them, right?
No, I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't study these things. I'm saying that in terms of quantum, I don't think we need to worry that much. I think the hype cycle is such that we don't need to worry about fielding it. But I agree with you that it's worth studying.
I think there's a resource allocation question. I think a lot of resources have gotten pulled into, I think a good example, aside from these two, is memory-safe languages. There's an enormous investment in cybersecurity analysis and push toward memory-safe languages, formal methods, and all of these really exciting techniques that might pay dividends later, but do not actually realistically help solve very big current problems, which require continued investment as well.
So just a quick follow-up. In terms of the hype, no hype thing, you're saying like invest in everything.
Everything. More investment.
Okay, in the front, and answer quickly.
Fazit Fatale from Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. We heard about the hype of the quantum not really happening in our lifetime, but what about AI agents that are malicious AI agents that are certainly trained to do cybersecurity attacks? What kind of like mitigations could there be, or what are the ways that we can mitigate some attacks that are like an agent that is just designed for this kind of task?
So I have a friend that a kind of Fortune 5 company or something that's high up in the security organization, and he says that it used to be that they'd have a compromise, and then they could like track a slow reaching out to different people and now they have a compromise and and the assumption is that LLMs play a part in automating these attack chains. I think it is a concern. I don't see it as a fundamental difference because these attacks were very effective before, and now they're effective faster, but they're still effective in the end either way.
It's an acceleration in both directions. Because you can use, I mean, again, like you find one vulnerability and then you can maybe use AI as well to find the tree of similar vulnerabilities in a variety of things and patch things more quickly, which is, how it's going to shake out. We'll see.
Almost like the dichotomy, the attacker-defender asymmetry, almost plays in favor, in the AI sense, in favor of the defender here, because they needed one attack to work anyways.
I just want to add, and I know we're out of time, but I want to add attacks against the AI systems, not just through the clever prompts or whatever, but through the software that enables these AI systems. There hasn't really been much attention that I've seen anyway on how do people attack. Do they attack them the same way they attack web servers or mail servers or whatever? They are software at some level, and so if somebody breaks into one of these AI systems, just how bad is it going to be?
I'm sorry to have to wrap up at the part that's most interesting to me personally, but I believe it's time for posters. And thank
you.